Rigorous textual research oriented towards historical writing. I am in France, just entered Versailles, and hold the position of Crown Prince. The only problem is that the current king is Louis XVI, and he will be overthrown in 2 years. Since neither the father or the ministers can be relied on, we have to take action to rectify France ourselves. First, make some small money casually to solve the financial crisis that has plagued the country for hundreds of years. Strike hard again at the nobles who have ulterior motives and are plotting to seize power. Then he copied the church that occupied a large amount of land for free. Industry, technology, agriculture, and commerce are advancing together, and I am the greatest prince of France. That year, Shaanxi was entangled in the pressure of the Allied army, and I directly took his small island. That year, I pointed my finger at the whole Europe, and I will take care of the unfinished feat of winning the emperor back then. Bookfriend Group Number 103-621-7580, welcome to join. Completing the novel, madam, please stop, welcome to taste it. Keywords of the novel. I am the Crown Prince of France without a pop-up window. I am the Crown Prince of France. Download the complete TXT collection, and read the latest chapters of I Am the Crown Prince of France. Chapter 1. Preface. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Preface. In the early winter of 1787, in the East Hall of the Palace of Versailles. The boy sat in a room adorned with Rococo-style gold decorations and large oil paintings, shaking his head and smiling bitterly at the exam paper in front of him. The luxurious crystal chandelier with a diameter of 2 meters flickered with candlelight, reflecting on his fair skin and delicate features, making him appear as handsome as Paris in an oil painting. Beside him, an elderly man with a white curly wig and a lace scarf on his head sighed, his brown eyes flashing with disappointment. He leaned over and said, "Your Highness, if you find it difficult, perhaps you can start learning basic courses." The young man, who was called the Crown Prince, was taken aback and suddenly regained consciousness from his wandering mind. He politely nodded to the old man. "Mr. Lagrange, I think you may have made a mistake. I meant to conduct a graduation assessment for your course, not an entrance exam." "That's right, this seemingly ordinary little old man is the founder of analytical mechanics, a pioneer in group theory, and a famous French mathematician and physicist known as the Prince of Mathematics." Lagrange. Graduation assessment. Lagrange frowned as he looked at the 13-year-old boy in front of him. "Your Highness, I teach university courses." "I'm afraid." The aristocratic youths around, dressed in gorgeous clothes and answering questions, immediately turned their heads and looked over, their eyes filled with curiosity. At this moment, there was a young man about 16 years old, wearing a silk jacket with a lace collar. Some of the boys with drooping eyes looked disdainful and said loudly, "Your Highness, I remember you should have 2 more years left to complete the basic courses." He nodded at the old man. Mr. Lagrange often said that the ladder of mathematics must be climbed step by step, and if you aim too high, you will inevitably fall and bleed. I think your Highness should also remember this proverb. The young man ignored him and said seriously to Lagrange, "Sir, I have self-taught college mathematics courses, and I really need a graduation assessment." The old mathematician sighed helplessly and turned to his assistant, saying, "André, please bring the exam paper at the bottom of my book folder." "Okay, Professor." Soon, several test papers were placed in front of the young man. He quickly browsed through it and found that the difficulty had increased several times compared to the previous one, but most of it was still at the high school level of later generations, involving a small amount of calculus content, which was really not difficult for himself. Yes, half a month ago he was still in his second year of graduate studies in the 21st century. That day, he went to France with his mentor to work on a wind turbine project and accidentally fell from the top of the tower. When he woke up, he found himself dressed as Louis Joseph, the eldest son of King Louis XVI of France. Perhaps due to the influence of time travel, Joseph was born several years earlier than in history, at the age of 13. Under the gaze of Lagrange's scrutiny, Joseph quickly wrote the answer to the first question, but his mind was thinking about the historical trend of France. Next year, the French Revolution will break out, and the royal family will all be affected. As the crown prince, he will definitely not be able to run away. King Louis XVI knows nothing except repairing locks. France owes more than 2 billion yuan in foreign debt, and its annual income is only 500 million yuan. Due to financial collapse, civil servants owe salaries, the daily operation of the government is difficult, foreign trade is stagnant, and the colonies are gradually deteriorating. In order to supplement the finances, the cabinet had to raise a large number of taxes, and the lower-class people were almost drained of their bones. However, the aristocrats with tax exemption rights were spending money and indulging in wine and meat all day long. In addition, France will experience severe hail next summer, coupled with the impact of drought in previous years, leading to a nationwide famine. Next is the Hunger Rebellion, which angrily brushes through the Bastille dungeons, opens the Great Fate expansion pack, causes national unrest, and tens of thousands of people go to the guillotine so, in order to save his head, he counted with his fingers. First, he had to solve France's financial deficit, 2. Get enough food to avoid starving to death, 3. Clean up the unscrupulous nobles, finally, we also have to deal with the British and Prussians who are eyeing us closely. And famine will start in July, leaving only a little over half a year for himself. He rubbed his forehead irritably because he was young and unable to get in touch with national politics, so he couldn't use his energy. It's a completely hellish start, with little hope not far away. The boy with sharp eyes saw his movements and thought he was worried because he couldn't solve problems. He immediately disdained and snorted coldly. This idiot, he even said he knows college courses, it's embarrassing. Why is this kind of straw bag the crown prince, but I am not? Joseph was thinking about how to save his life while quickly writing down the answer and quickly completed the first page of the exam. He flipped through the pages with impatience, passing the subject of Lagrange and even completing his studies at the University of Paris himself. Half a month ago, he proposed to Queen Mary, his cheap mother, to participate in politics in an attempt to turn around the inevitable situation, but was politely rejected by the latter, asking him to focus on his studies and wait until he achieved something. So he had to make an agreement with the Queen that he would officially participate in politics after completing his courses at the University of Paris. Of course, at his level, he is a fighter jet among the top students in this era. In the past half-month, he had already completed most of the subjects, but this was still because he had to memorize incorrect knowledge, which delayed his time. In this era, many knowledge that was believed to be true was actually fallacy. Lagrange watched the crown prince write like a flying pen, no longer caring about other students, his eyes widened wider and wider. This is a question that can only be completed after studying at the University of Paris for 5 years. The crown prince surprisingly answered it effortlessly and with a clear mind. One is right. He's only 13 years old and he's still self-taught. Lagrange's heart was shaken, was another Leibniz born? Lagrange suddenly glanced at his assistant, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he thought to himself, can it be that André missed the question for the crown prince? After all, the crown prince has behaved too strangely. You should know that even super prodigies like Leibniz don't start college until they are 14 years old. He immediately took a pen and paper, brushed and wrote a few lines of words, and handed them to Joseph, saying, Your Highness, there's no need to do the rest. As long as you complete these questions, I'll let you pass. The young man with hanging eyes sneered to himself upon seeing this. Ah, Lagrange, this is because he doesn't know how to do it. Do you want to let water go? Stupid attachment to the royal family. I need to find a way to show everyone Prince Wang's exam paper and make him embarrass himself. Joseph looked at the paper in surprise. There were only 5 questions, the difficulty remained the same, and the number of questions decreased. Good thing. He quickly completed the first 2 questions, only to see that the third question was, please write the proof process of Rawls' theorem, which he was very familiar with. Without thinking, he wrote in the blank space. Rawls' theorem makes f continuous on the closed interval, b, and continuous on the open interval, a, b. If f, a, equals f, b, then there is at least one point in the open interval, b, where the value of its derivative is 0. Proof. Because function f, x, is continuous within, a, b, the maximum value, m, and minimum value, m, obtained in the closed interval. Joseph finished writing 3 or 2 times, but suddenly realized that Lagrange beside him was breathing rapidly. He quickly looked up and saw the old mathematician with an excited expression, staring at the exam paper as if he had seen his first love. Joseph immediately lowered his head and scanned the question, hesitating. I shouldn't have written it wrong, right? Lagrange grabbed the exam paper and carefully reviewed the proof process several times before murmuring, so it also holds on differentiable functions. How come I didn't expect it? He looked at Joseph again with a fiery gaze and said, Your Highness, how did you think of it? Ah. No, it's just. Joseph suddenly remembered that Rawls simply proved that between two adjacent real roots of a polynomial equation, the equation has at least one root, and it wasn't until the 19th century that someone extended it to the category of differentiable functions. Careless, there was no flicker, cough. He quickly retrieved the test paper and changed the topic. Mr. Lagrange, I need to do the last 2 questions. The new book has set sail, kneeling down for collection, kneeling down for comments. Please support us a lot, Tianhaitian is extremely grateful. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Son of the Divine Family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Son of the Divine Family. No need to do it. Lagrange grabbed Joseph's shoulder vigorously and exclaimed excitedly, This new deduction is enough to prove your ability. I will go back to university today to apply for your degree certificate. Thank you very much. Joseph was overjoyed and broke free from the old mathematician's hands, bowing to him before rushing out of the door. Lagrange originally intended to give a speech, but found out that the person had run away. He was stunned for a moment and quickly chased after him, saying urgently, How did your Highness come up with the idea of differentiable functions? Tell me your thoughts. The boys in the classroom looked at each other for a while before someone hesitated and said, Can anyone tell me, Prince Wang, is this graduation? It seems like this. But he only came today. The boy with hanging eyes stared at Joseph's back and said with hatred, No, he must have cheated. André gave him a blank glance without a trace and placed the Lagrangian sunrise question in front of him. The question was given by the professor on the spot, and His Highness' proof is a brand new mathematical discovery. If the Duke of Chartres thinks cheating can achieve these things, perhaps he can try it himself. The Duke of Chartres stared at formulas that he couldn't understand at all. If struck by lightning, he had always considered himself a leader among the younger generation of the royal family, but now he couldn't even understand the proof process written by others. Did Joseph's previous incompetence all come out of disguise, just to embarrass himself? He clenched his fists tightly. Joseph, wait, I'll make you crawl at my feet sooner or later. Joseph naturally couldn't hear a few people's conversations, but even if he heard them, he wouldn't care. It was just a child arguing aimlessly. What he was thinking about now was how to reorganize France and avoid the situation of being overwhelmed by a major crisis. Lagrange caught up panting and pestered him for a while, asking questions and suddenly feeling like he had caught something from the Crown Prince's proof. He muttered to himself. What if f, a, is not equal to f, b? He murmured a few times, his expression serious, hastily bid farewell to Joseph, and returned directly to the university office. Joseph watched him walk away and whispered. If f, a, is not equal to f, b, then it is your Lagrangian mean value theorem. Good luck, I hope you can prove it a few years earlier. As the figure of the old mathematician disappeared, he waved to the attendant who had been following him all along. Iman, where is your Majesty the Queen now? The tall blond young man quickly bowed and said, Your Highness, your Majesty the Queen is in her tea room. Joseph nodded at him, turned around, and ran towards the end of the wide corridor. The intense exercise caused him to cough, which reminded him that his pneumonia was not yet cured. The original owner's constitution was very weak, and the pneumonia had been going on for over a month, but there was still no sign of recovery. He waved his hand to Emmanuel as he approached, indicating that he was fine. He then circled around for over 100 meters before finally seeing the door to the Queen's tea room. Starting from today, I can finally show my skills and start saving myself. He took a deep breath and strode in through the doors between the guards on both sides. In the cozy and elegantly decorated tea room, with a 2-foot-tall complex hair bun and fair skin, Queen Mary sat back in an Oriental-style armchair with a pair of light blue beauties, holding documents in one hand and black tea in the other, carefully listening to the minister next to her. It seemed like she was dealing with government affairs. Louis XVI spent his days soaking in the lock-making workshop, so most of the time she was in charge of politics. Joseph secretly sighed in his heart that Louis XVI was actually a rare benevolent ruler in French history, but he took over a country with many flaws, and he was not very good at governing the country. He was also addicted to lock-making, which ultimately caused the people to struggle and led to a great crisis. If in a peaceful and prosperous era, more than 16 would be a beloved and well-respected king. In fact, Joseph has a good impression of him, and if possible, he really wants to save his life. The voice of the ceremonial officer came from the side. Prince Wang is here. Joseph, following the court etiquette, took a half-step back with his right foot towards Queen Mary, stroked his chest, bowed to the courtiers one by one. Only then did he excitedly approach the Queen and say, "Mother, I passed the graduation assessment for college mathematics." Queen Mary's eyes sparkled with joy as she put down the documents and joyfully grasped his hand. "Joseph, you are truly the pride of me and your father." She had already sent someone to verify Prince Wang's coursework and confirmed that he had passed all subjects except mathematics with excellent grades, which means he had already completed the courses at the University of Paris by now. She looked at her son with a complex expression and said, "Why do you secretly self-study without telling me or your father? I mean, you can definitely learn from a famous teacher." Joseph could only make up an excuse to explain his sudden transformation into a top student, saying that he had been self-studying for many years in private. "Because," Joseph said stiffly, "I want to give you a surprise. This surprise is really amazing." The Queen picked up a piece of pudding with a strawberry in it and stuffed it into his mouth, then fondled his slightly curled hair. "How did you put so much knowledge into your little head?" A slim and tall man next to him, dressed in a tight-fitting suit with a dark blue patterned wrinkled collar and a ring of sapphires at the neckline, frowned and asked the minister next to him in a low voice. "Bishop Brian, did the Crown Prince just say that he has completed college mathematics?" The latter nodded and said, "It seems so." "How could this be possible?" I was also very shocked. Behind them, the Queen's confidant, the clerk, whispered. "Not only mathematics, Your Highness has completed more than 10 courses at the University of Paris, including physics, chemistry, mathematics, geometry, and English." Several ministers around widened their eyes upon hearing this and said, "How could this be possible? I remember, Prince Wang is only 13 years old, right? It's simply unbelievable." "Yeah," the secretary sighed, "those teachers who have taught His Highness before called him the son of the divine family. Son of the divine family. Huh, with such a genius crown prince, France will surely be even more brilliant. What a blessing for France." Joseph ignored the minister's rainbow farts and broke free from the Queen's hands, saying to her with some urgency, "Your Majesty, according to the agreement, may I participate in politics now?" Queen Mary nodded indulgently and said, "That's right, my genius son. Oh, by the way, I suggest you go to the Paris City Hall first and accumulate some experience." Joseph frowned, he was going to rectify France. Fundamentally avoid angering citizens and slaughtering the entire royal family. "What can I do to go to the City Hall?" Engage in urban transportation. Or sewage treatment. He has watched many documentaries about France's great destiny before and is well aware that the most core problem in France at present is finance. The collapse of the government, the inability to provide disaster relief, and the descent of the nobility, all of which are caused by financial collapse. So, to rectify France, we must first rectify our finances. Joseph looked at the Queen and probed, I think maybe the Chancellor of the Exchequer would be more suitable for me. Queen Mary smiled kindly upon hearing the words. France's financial problems were a persistent problem, and since Louis XVI ascended the throne, almost all the energy of the government and opposition has been focused on solving the financial crisis, but they have always been helpless. How could a 13-year-old boy, even the son of a divine family, bear such a heavy burden? She put away her smile and thought for a moment before saying, Joseph, if you're interested in finance, you can go to the Paris tax office first. Joseph knew it was because he didn't believe in his own abilities, but it was also normal, as his body was only 13 years old. He had to settle for second place. Then let me be the assistant to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. At this point, the assistant is actually the Deputy Chancellor of the Exchequer, the second in command of finance. The new book has been signed through internal investment, and I beg my thighs to invest in this book. With tears in my eyes, I am looking forward to the recommendation of 100 investments. Let's give my thighs a thumbs up. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Going to Paris, for collection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Going to Paris, for collection. Before the Queen could speak this time, the tall and thin man with a cold gaze suddenly coughed and took a half-step forward. Your Majesty, it seems that you mentioned that you want His Royal Highness the Crown Prince to participate in politics. Queen Mary turned her head and said calmly. Yes, Duke of Orleans, I have made an agreement with the Crown Prince that if he completes his university courses, he can participate in national affairs. The Duke of Orleans fixed his gaze and muttered to himself, the Crown Prince has always been mediocre, why has he suddenly become so powerful? Did he always pretend before? But why did he do this? Now that he suddenly shows his strength, what are his intentions? Anyway, after years of manipulation, the prestige of the royal family has greatly declined, and the position is becoming increasingly unstable. If a genius prince suddenly appears, it will inevitably enhance the confidence of the court and the public in the royal family. This is very detrimental to one's own layout, we need to try to hold him down. As soon as he thought it over, he immediately spoke loudly, Your Majesty, the Crown Prince is still young and has no political experience. I think it would be more appropriate to choose a senior minister to teach him several years of political knowledge before participating in government affairs. Queen Mary frowned slightly, and the Duke of Orleans made some sense. Although the Crown Prince has amazing talent, he is only 13 years old. If he messes up in national politics, it will have a negative impact on his reputation. She looked at her son and said in a deliberative tone, Joseph, maybe you can study for a while longer. Joseph glanced at the Duke of Orleans, who, as a traveler, was well aware of his background. Louis Philippe, the cousin of Louis XVI. Currently, everyone thought he was loyal and patriotic to the king, but in reality, he had been committed to overthrowing the king's lineage since his father's generation and ascending the throne himself. After the success of the French Grand Order in history, when the Girondins voted to decide whether to execute the king, the Duke of Orleans did not hesitate to vote in favor and ultimately sentenced Louis XVI to death with 301.30 votes. It can be said that it was his crucial vote that sent Louis XVI to the guillotine. Joseph didn't expect him to jump out in a hurry and immediately said without hesitation. Your Majesty, 300 years ago when Joan of Arc defeated the British army, she was the same age as me. She proved herself through practical actions. Please believe in my abilities and give me the opportunity to prove myself. Orleans said with great sincerity, Your Highness, the relationship between the country and politics is significant. It is not with confidence that Joseph didn't get used to him and waved his hand forcefully. "Duke of Orleans, this is my agreement with His Majesty the Queen, please don't interrupt." He looked at the Queen again and said, "Mother, as an assistant to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, shouldn't I also be able to learn from Bishop Brian?" Several cabinet ministers were all taken aback. Unexpectedly, the young prince had the courage to confront the Duke of Orleans in person. It should be noted that even the chief minister had to consult with the latter on a regular basis. The Duke of Orleans never expected Joseph to give him so little face. After a moment of confusion, he realized and angrily shouted, "Finance is the lifeline of France, and inexperienced young people must not interfere." Many ministers around nodded in agreement. Upon seeing this, Queen Mary looked at the prince with a firm expression and ultimately compromised. "Joseph, you go to the city hall first, and if you perform well, we will discuss the matter of exposing you to finance." Joseph glanced at the 7 or 8 cabinet ministers in the room and knew that with them present, it would be difficult for the Queen to give herself a green light. It seemed that she could only go to the city hall for a while before making a decision. He nodded and said, "Yes, Your Majesty the Queen." The Duke of Orleans wanted to stir up a little more and approached, saying, "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince should study first." "That's the decision." Queen Mary interrupted him and looked at Brian. "Please continue talking about tax reform." Joseph sat on the side, listening to this cabinet meeting and gaining a deeper understanding of France's poor financial situation. 9% of the content of the meeting was about money, or more precisely, about not having money. After the meeting, the Queen Fay said she wanted to reward him and took him to taste a lot of desserts together. It wasn't until he was sore throat from various well-made and colorful cakes, pudding, and macaron that he finally regained his freedom. Joseph came out of the tea room with a heavy heart, suddenly thinking that perhaps he could walk the path of Louis XVI. When he arrived at the king's palace, he was informed that Louis XVI was busy with a masterpiece, and had been eating and sleeping in the lock-making workshop for 3 consecutive days without coming out. Joseph Tun felt a wave of exhaustion. Why not go to the guillotine with such a father? Forget it, I reckon 16, who was in high spirits, would also send himself to find the Queen and the boomerang. He smiled bitterly and shook his head, then turned around and instructed Emmanuel, "Prepare the car, go straight to the Paris City Hall." "Yes, Your Highness." When Joseph left the main entrance of the Palace of Versailles, he saw more than 10 carriages parked in the marble courtyard in front of him, with over 60 or 70 people standing respectfully on the side. He couldn't help but nod and shake his head. He roughly recognized these people as the Crown Prince's exclusive attendants, including beauticians, chefs, tailors, and so on. It seemed that they were ready to go with them, no wonder they had to prepare so many carriages. Joseph quickly asked Emmanuel to send them back and take these people to the city hall. "Isn't that a mess?" Later, he looked at the silver royal carriage parked in front of him, which had an elegant design and was covered in exquisite reliefs. The corners and corners were all decorated with gold wire, making it extremely luxurious. After thinking for a moment, he turned around and got into an ordinary carriage for his attendants. He took a royal carriage and went out, leaving no peace along the way. Quickly, 3 gray-black carriages drove out of the Palace of Versailles Square and sped east. The Palace of Versailles is located in the western suburbs of Paris, more than 3 hours by car from the city center. In the carriage, Joseph yawned wearily and caught a glimpse of a stack of books on the wooden table in front of him. He picked it up and flipped through it, only to find that it was actually information from the Paris City Hall. He looked at Iman sitting across from him, who immediately smiled, caressed his chest, and saluted, clearly all of which he had prepared. Being able to be the steward of the Crown Prince is far beyond the comparison of ordinary people. Joseph nodded at him with a smile and then began reading the materials in his hand, which were very detailed, covering the personnel structure, functions, and daily operations of the City Hall. When Joseph flipped to the 3rd page, he saw that the subordinate departments of the City Hall included the police department. He quickly looked down and confirmed that the Paris police were completely under the jurisdiction of the City Hall, which made his eyes brighten. It seems that taking up a position at the city hall this time is not a waste of time, at least we can reorganize the Paris police force. For the lower class of French people, disorderly security is the second biggest nightmare after exorbitant taxes and levies. Being stolen or robbed while walking on the street is a small matter, and it is not uncommon to commit crimes such as burglary, murder, and kidnapping. As for the gang members who exploit and oppress citizens all day long, they are a major cancer in Paris. At present, the entire Europe has not yet established a modern police system, and public security still relies on citizen joint defense and self-protection. There is no need to think about solving cases, as crime is extremely rampant and ordinary people are in danger. So the significance of rectifying law enforcement is very great. Solving public security issues can greatly improve social stability, and social stability can greatly reduce the impulse of the people to chop down the royal family. Joseph finished flipping through the information from the city hall and carefully pondered on the details of improving law enforcement. The carriage had already driven into the city center of Paris, and a suffocating stench suddenly came from outside the car window. The new book has been signed through internal investment, and I beg my thighs to invest in this book. The author is eagerly awaiting the recommendation of 100 investments with tearful eyes, so let's give them a thumbs up first. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Breaking Cases on Hand. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Breaking Cases on Hand. Joseph casually opened the curtains and frowned when he saw the surrounding scenery. Since he came to this world, he has been taking exams in the Palace of Versailles, and this is the first time he has seen the appearance of Paris. It is completely different from the imagined busiest metropolis in Europe. The buildings are dirty and old, and the streets are filled with mud, sewage, and even excrement. The odor comes from this. Dead animal carcasses occasionally float over the Seine River, while factories along the banks discharge eerily colored wastewater into the river, dyeing it brown. The vendors scattered their stalls on both sides of the road, causing the originally spacious streets to become overcrowded. The children were waving mud and happily chasing each other. Unclear curses kept coming and going. Fights and brawls can also be seen everywhere, and passers-by turn a deaf ear to the screams of the victims. There were even people robbing in broad daylight, and it wasn't until Joseph asked his guards to stop them that the robbers broke into the alley and escaped. And this is the most secure Louvre district in all of Paris. In short, the entire city has no romantic atmosphere influenced by Enlightenment ideas, let alone the vigorous vitality of the Industrial Revolution. The magnificent Palace of Versailles, although close to Paris, seems to be in a different world. The carriage passed by the north bank of the Seine River, and the driver let out a soft woo as the carriage slowly came to a stop. "Your Highness, we are here." Iman bowed and gestured before getting off the car to open the door for the Crown Prince. Joseph rubbed his nearly shattered buttocks, walked down the stairs arranged by his attendants, and looked up to see a magnificent building nearly 100 meters wide, carved with statues on the exterior wall, composed of a large number of columns and arched French window, like a huge castle in the center of Paris, proclaiming the supremacy of the feudal class. The city hall has already received the news that Prince Wang is coming, and at this time, officials of all sizes are gathered on the square outside the main gate, queuing up to welcome His Highness. But the silver royal carriage they eagerly awaited never appeared. Until 3 gray and black carriages stopped at the front door of the city hall, Emmanuel emerged from the carriage, and the Paris municipal commissioner, led by Louis XVI, blinked and hurriedly called out to the people around him. "Hurry up. It's His Royal Highness the Crown Prince." Levable, holding his black triangular hat in his hand, stepped out of his trapezoidal legs and drove his body towards a weight of 200 pounds. He led the crowd to Joseph and respectfully bowed, "Your Highness, the Crown Prince." The musicians around also reacted and began to play the music hurriedly. L.A. Vebert first introduced himself and then pointed to the middle-aged man next to him with grey-blue eyes and cheekbones almost piercing his skin, saying, "Your Highness, please allow me to introduce you to Viscount Flessel, the president of the Paris Chamber of Commerce. Joseph glanced at the person twice upon hearing this. He learned from the information just now that although L.A. Vebert was the commissioner of the city of Paris, equivalent to the mayor, Paris actually had one hand, which was this Flessel. There is no way, the government is short of money, and in order to maintain its operation, it needs to rely on the investment of the Chamber of Commerce. In addition, the Chamber of Commerce's network can solve many problems, so the president of the Chamber of Commerce has become extremely powerful. Fraser bowed again and said, "Your Highness, we have prepared an afternoon banquet and would appreciate your honor." Although Joseph did not like the banquets and dances of this era, and for him, all kinds of cumbersome etiquette and rules were simply torture, but worldly wisdom was still inevitable, so he nodded in response. "Thank you very much, everyone." In the spacious and luxurious City Hall banquet hall, servants shuttle back and forth busily, and the table is filled with various precious dishes. Cooled dishes are immediately replaced with new ones. Amidst the constant banter and laughter, Joseph was dealing with the endless rainbow farts of the officials, but his mind was constantly preoccupied with the task of rectifying the police. "Your Highness, do you mean to participate in police management?" The chubby mayor looked at the president of the Chamber of Commerce in surprise and quickly apologized to Joseph, "Your Highness, you are so prestigious. How can you deal with thieves, murderers, and so on?" The president of the Chamber of Commerce nodded in agreement and said, "That's right, and the police department has a lot of trivial matters, which are very boring." He couldn't help but complain in his heart. "My little master, you just came to gild it, but don't be so serious. This is going to disrupt the police system, and Paris is still going to have a riot." Joseph felt somewhat helpless as he was arguing back and forth with the two of them when suddenly a woman's high-profile voice came from outside the city hall. "No. Lennet could never have committed suicide. You must catch the killer." The voice suddenly became sharp, like an aria, "Lennet is so cheerful. We're getting married next month, how could he commit suicide? We can't close the case. The murderer is still at large." The chubby mayor's face turned black and he angrily said, "Why did she come again?" Versailles immediately waved his hand vigorously to the guard and said, "Hurry up and drive her away. Didn't you see who's here today?" He turned to Joseph again and apologized, "Ah, Your Highness, she's just a crazy woman. Don't let her affect your mood." Joseph looked out the window and asked, "I heard her say the killer, what exactly is the situation?" Mayor L.A. Vebert quickly said, "A month ago, her fiancé A.E., Viscount Lennet, committed suicide by swallowing a sword." "Oh, the case is clear and there is no problem, but this woman seems to be crazy, insisting that it was murder. She caused too much trouble, so we had to prohibit her from entering the city hall, but she would shout outside every few days." Joseph said somewhat strangely, "Suicide by swallowing a sword." The emaciated man sitting on the right side of Levable gestured to caress his chest. "Your Highness, it is a common way to commit suicide by placing the hilt of the sword against the ground, swallowing the tip of the sword into the mouth, and then pressing it down with force, causing the sword to penetrate the back of the neck." Joseph remembers Mayor Pang just introduced him, Viscount Guizot, the Paris Police Commissioner, who is the highest head of Paris Police. Seeing that the Crown Prince seemed interested, Guizot enthusiastically recounted. "A little over a month ago in the afternoon, Viscount Lennet's servant came to report that his master had died in his own bedroom. I sent someone to investigate and found out that he had committed suicide by swallowing his sword." Joseph frowned and said, "How can you be sure if he committed suicide? Did he have a suicide note, or did he show signs of pessimism before?" "That's not true," said Guizot, "but Lebrun used his own sword and there was no loss of property. There were no signs of fighting in the room, and there were no other injuries on his body. You should know, Your Highness, that Lennet has fought in the United States and is at a height of 6 feet. He is skilled in combat. If anyone can put a sword into his mouth in broad daylight without harming him at all, it can only be himself. 6 feet over 1.9 meters, it is indeed a towering figure. Joseph squinted his eyes slightly, and he had seen many similar methods of murder in detective novels. There were no signs of suicide or suicide letters, and in the 18th century, these police officers who had not attended a police academy and had limited information would roughly classify them as suicides. He looked at Kizo and said, "No, besides himself, there is another kind of person who can do it." "Your Highness is really good at joking," the chubby mayor smiled and waved his hand. "Does that person know magic?" Joseph said calmly, "No, he just knows how to treat teeth." "Treating teeth? Are you talking about dentists?" "Yes, dentist." A few people around were suddenly stunned, and a picture came to mind. Lebrun obediently opened his mouth at the dentist's command, and then the dentist covered his eyes with the white cloth used during the surgery. He turned around and pulled out his sword hanging on the wall, effortlessly stabbing it into his mouth, and blood spurted out. Note 1. Due to the 18th century Europe's emphasis on fast and flexible swordsmanship, the swords of the nobility were thin and light, making it difficult to wipe their necks. Therefore, they often committed suicide by swallowing their swords. Moreover, this suicide method maintains a kneeling prayer posture after death, making it more popular among nobles. The new book has set sail, begging for collection, recommendation, review, and everything. The author is extremely grateful. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The Duke of Orleans's Counterattack. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The Duke of Orleans's Counterattack. Kizo was the first to awaken and summoned his subordinates sitting at the far end of the banquet table, ordering. "Caesar, take someone to investigate if there was any contact between a dentist and Leonard a month ago." Joseph thought for a moment and added, "If a dentist has been to Lennett's house, his servant should know." But the servant's confession was not mentioned. Kizo said in a daze, "No." "Caesar, interrogate the servant together." "Yes, sir." Outside the city hall, the cries of Lennett's fiancée stopped. It was unclear whether the guards had driven her away or someone had told her that the case needed to be investigated again. In the afternoon, the chubby mayor and a group of city hall officials came to invite Joseph to a dinner party. The police officer named Caesar suddenly rushed over and whispered to Kizo in a low voice. The latter's eyes lit up, and he turned around to salute Joseph, caressing his chest. His voice was high-pitched, saying, "Your Highness, as you expected," Lennett's servant quickly confessed after being arrested and said that a dentist had indeed been to Lennett's house at the time of the crime. The servant took a sum of money from that person and gave false testimony. The president of the Chamber of Commerce urgently asked, "What about the culprit?" Caesar searched the dentist's residence and found that he was an Englishman. His brother had fought in the United States and was shot and killed by Lennett. He came to seek revenge. Kizo coughed dryly, but Caesar accidentally stabbed him to death while pursuing him. Upon hearing these words, more than 10 city hall officials around couldn't help but look at Joseph in unison, their eyes filled with surprise and admiration. At the noon banquet, the crown prince only judged the situation of the murderer based on some clues he heard. Now the actual investigation results of the police are almost the same as what he said. The chubby mayor immediately exclaimed loudly, "Fortunately, the crown prince is wise, and the murderer was not able to escape justice." He smiled and turned his head to the officials behind him, whispering, "That woman will finally not come back to the city hall to make trouble." At night, Joseph moved into his private villa at the repeated invitation of the president of the Chamber of Commerce, Fraser. The city hall is too far from the palace of Versailles, and he doesn't want to travel back and forth. Joseph leaned against the soft king bed, staring at the opposite wall, but feeling a bit annoyed in his heart. Today, Mayor Pang and the president of the Chamber of Commerce have been practicing Tai Chi with him and have never agreed for him to intervene in the police department. He turned over and thought that if he couldn't persuade them tomorrow, he would write a letter to the Queen asking her to insert himself into the police department. Outside, Iman lightly tapped on the door and said, Your Highness, have you slept? Not yet, you come in. Iman pushed the door open and respectfully handed a letter to Joseph, saying, Your Highness, it was sent by the police department, as if it was left by Mr. Lennox's fiancée A.E. She. A letter to me. Iman said with a heavy tone, Well, she committed suicide tonight. Joseph's mood became a bit heavy, and he didn't expect there to be such a passionate woman in the world. He opened the letter and saw that the first few lines were thanking the police officers such as Caesar. Then he expressed that she really wanted to thank the Crown Prince in person for uncovering the real culprit, but due to the huge difference in identity, she could not be seen and could only express her gratitude in this way. The words of gratitude were written for a whole page. At the end of the letter, she said that she was already loveless without Lennet. The police have avenged Lennet, so she is going to follow her lover. After her death, she will donate all her property to His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and the police station separately. This gift surprised Joseph a bit, and Emmanuel whispered to him, Your Highness, it is said that Miss Easterly has left behind 4,000 livres of property. On the banks of the Seine River. The royal palace, located here, was once a palace of Louis XIV and now belongs to the Duke of Orleans. The Orleans family once served as regents during the reign of Louis XV, wielding immense power. After more than 100 years of accumulation, they possessed a wealth comparable to that of the royal family. The Duke of Orleans has been continuously developing his power from his father's generation on this basis. Although he does not hold an actual official position, he is able to attend cabinet meetings with considerable authority. In addition, he is skilled in acting and generous in throwing money, making him a guest of honor in various political circles and also highly respected among the nobility. A luxurious carriage drove into the royal palace and stopped in front of the flower gallery. The Duke of Orleans got off the carriage along the steps arranged by his servants. The sound of a speech came from the nearby garden, and he turned his head and glanced over, with a smile on his lips. He knew that it was a gathering of some organization dissatisfied with the royal family. Yes, the royal palace is now a secret base against the royal family, and in the future, the backbone of the Faians, Girondists, and Jacobins will often gather here. In addition, various prohibited items, including controlled arms, can be sold here. The Duke of Orleans used his power to prop up their protective umbrella. He has been working hard for decades and will strongly support anything that helps overthrow the royal family. The Duke of Orleans threw his coat to his servant and strode into the main hall. As soon as the guard opened the door, he saw his son beating and scolding the maid. He coughed lightly and approached, Philip, what's wrong with you? The young man turned his head and turned out to be a mischievous teenager who was taking a math exam with Joseph in the morning. He pointed at the maid and screamed loudly, This fool. He brought black tea when I was in a bad mood. It's still so hot. What makes you feel so bad? That Joseph. Philip clenched his fist and gritted his teeth, he must have cheated. He can't have taken any college courses. The Duke of Orleans frowned as he asked about the whole story. He didn't expect the Crown Prince to be able to impress a scholar like Lagrange. The king's lineage had easily produced Louis XVI, but why was his son so outstanding? It is necessary to suppress the Crown Prince before he gains prestige, otherwise the difficulty of overthrowing the king will increase again. He comforted his son a few words, and then saw the butler walking quickly, bowing and saying, Sir, Mr. Fleuva is asking to see you. Is it the confidant of L.A. Webel? Let him wait for me in the study. In the study, the Duke of Orleans read through the letter sent by Fleuva, but with a sneer in his eyes, he handed it to the butler beside him. Prince Wang may be a bit clever, but he is still a child. If he were to live in the city hall, I really had no way to deal with him, but he actually took the initiative to participate in police management. The butler looked at the letter and exclaimed, Paris has always been a mix of good and bad, especially in the slums. Robbery and murder have never stopped, and those experienced municipal workers with decades of experience are at a loss. The Crown Prince is asking for trouble on his own. The Duke of Orleans smiled and nodded. Since Joseph is so confident, let's help him become famous. He turned to Frouva and said, "Go back and tell Levable to appoint the Crown Prince as the police commissioner for the San Antonio district." The commissioner of police is a powerful position second only to the commissioner of police, responsible for all police affairs in a region of Paris. There are only 6 police commissioners in Paris. Yes, Your Highness. As soon as L.A. Webert's confidant left, the Duke of Orleans instructed the butler, "Let the Paris News and the Citizens Daily pay more attention to the crime and police management in the St. Anthony district, and write in detail about the police officer there, our prince." "Yes," the butler bowed and retreated. The Duke of Orleans strolled to the window and looked contentedly at the royal palace garden in the darkness, with a curved mouth. When the San Antonio district becomes a mess, how can the Austrian watch defend her son? Prince Wang. Soon, people will think you are just like your father. The Austrian watch in his mouth refers to Queen Mary, who was born in Austria. The new book has been signed through internal investment, and I beg my thighs to invest in this book. The author is eagerly anticipating the recommendation of 100 investments with tearful eyes, rolling and jumping up and down in search. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. First be a small official, seeking chapter recommendation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. First be a small official, seeking chapter recommendation, the next morning. Upon seeing the president of the Chamber of Commerce, the Paris Municipal Commissioner, L.A. Vabelf, waved at him with a face full of fat, exchanged a few pleasantries, and then said, "By the way, how do you feel about the case that Prince Wang solved yesterday? The Crown Prince's intelligence and talent have shocked me. I really look forward to the day when he will lead France," exclaimed Fraser with emotion, who said it's not. Louisbel smiled. "After careful consideration, I think His Highness is fully capable of serving as a police commissioner." After his persuasion, Flessel was eventually persuaded by him. Anyway, the Crown Prince himself wanted to work in the police department, so it was better to give him a favor. On this side, Joseph had just entered the entrance of the city hall when he saw the chubby mayor welcoming him, smiling and saying, "Your Highness, yesterday the police commissioner of the San Antonio district, Mr. Cimmerian, took a long leave due to illness. I wonder if you are interested in becoming a police commissioner." San Antonio district. The president of the Chamber of Commerce was stunned for a moment and whispered to Levable, "Why didn't you just say where it was? It's too chaotic there." "In case your Highness." The municipal commissioner interrupted him in a low voice, "If Prince Wang doesn't go on patrol, there won't be anything wrong. Your Highness, the people left behind by Cimmerian are all familiar hands. You just need to rest assured," said the chubby mayor, blocking what else Versailles wanted to say. Joseph was surprised by how these two people changed so quickly, but he immediately agreed, "Okay, I'll accept this position." He learned yesterday that the Commissioner of Police is in charge of all police affairs in a region, and above him is the Commissioner of Police. And the City Hall is unlikely to make itself the police chief. After all, age is here. L.A. Webert immediately received another round of praise, sending the Crown Prince to the police station and keeping an eye on the issuance of his appointment documents before leaving with satisfaction. Joseph didn't delay any time, and with the personal escort of Police Commissioner Caso, he drove directly to the San Antonio district to take office. After walking for over an hour, the carriage entered the San Antonio area, and the surrounding scenery immediately became somewhat dilapidated. The residents who came and went had a numb expression, with crumbling makeshift shelters visible everywhere. Homeless people with a foul odor collapsed in the corners of the walls, half of the shops were closed, and there were few street vendors on the roadside. Only the street-standing women wearing cheap clothes were casually soliciting customers, bringing a little anger to this place. Not long after walking, Joseph saw several times the ones collecting protection fees, and then encountered two gangs of gang members fighting each other on the street, with blood flowing everywhere. Passers-by saw it from afar, so they lowered their heads and ran away, and there were no police officers present from beginning to end. However, Kiso seemed to be accustomed to this scene and only happily talked about the ball, urging the prince to attend a masquerade ball next month. Joseph thought to himself, no wonder this was the place where the riots first occurred during the French Revolution. Anyone who lives in this environment for a few years, accompanied by extreme poverty, will definitely accumulate a lot of resentment. Once it erupts, the destructive power is astonishing. He let out a long sigh. It seemed that he had come to the San Antonio district right this time. Half an hour later, the carriage stopped in front of a small courtyard surrounded by uneven wooden boards. The courtyard was a dilapidated building with no visible signs. "Your Highness, this is the San Antonio District Police Station." Kiso gestured to the outside of the car outside the hospital. A police officer saw that the police chief was getting off the carriage and hurriedly ran in to report. After a moment, several police officers quickly led their troops to greet him. Kiso first bowed to Joseph, then looked at the crowd in front of him, cleared his throat, and loudly said, "Your Highness, the esteemed Crown Prince, is here. He will serve as the police commissioner here from now on." The assistant next to him immediately displayed the appointment documents. Everyone at the San Antonio District Police Station was stunned and lost in thought. How could such a big shot come to this small place like ours? But isn't Prince Wang only 13 years old? Lord, he wants to be a police commissioner. The police station is afraid that it will be messed up in a mess after a while. A tall and thin man with deep sunken eyes greeted him and respectfully bowed, saying, "Your Highness, Prince Wang, your arrival has made our small place shine. On behalf of everyone here, Assistant Police Commissioner Bono warmly welcomes you. His Highness, this is Ma Jiaoni, the security inspector of the second team, and this is Ma Jiaoni, the security inspector of the third team." Several security inspectors rushed forward to bow, and Joseph smiled as he returned the salute one by one. He had seen in the information provided by the City Hall that the Assistant Police Commissioner was the second in command of the police station, while the security inspector was responsible for commanding the police to go out and patrol, usually with more than 10 subordinates, belonging to the middle level of the police station. Bono and others crowded around Joseph into the police station, and the Magni quickly walked up a few steps with a look of admiration on his face. He said, "Your Highness, I heard from Caesar that you solved a murder case in just over 10 minutes yesterday, making us police officers who have been working for more than 10 years feel inferior." Joseph didn't expect the news to spread so quickly to the district of San Antonio, so he quickly apologized a few words. As he entered the dilapidated building at the police station, Joseph couldn't help but frown as he watched the group of police officers following suit behind him. He instructed them not to follow along and to do whatever they wanted, including sending Kiso away. Finally, the surroundings became quiet. Joseph, led by Bono, went to the police commissioner's office, looked around, and sat down in front of the spacious oak desk. Bono accompanied his smiling face and said, "Your Highness, would you like tea or hot cocoa? I will prepare the dinner for you right away." "Thank you, don't bother," Joseph interrupted him with a wave of his hand. "Please bring me the situation in your jurisdiction, as well as documents related to the case and personnel." Bono was a bit surprised. He thought the Crown Prince was just coming to play for a few days, but he didn't expect him to really come. The documents were quickly delivered, and Joseph only flipped through a few pages before furrowing his brow. Just last month, there were 28 murders, 63 robberies, and 220 thefts in the San Antonio district, and the population of this district is only 80,000. This number is only reported, and I don't know how many have not been reported. The situation is much worse than I imagined. Joseph picked up the information of the police officers again. There were a total of 181 police officers in the entire San Antonio district, of which 120 were paid for police positions, while only 61 entered the police force through inheritance, recruitment, and other means. In addition, there is a patrol team spontaneously formed by the people, with a total of over 200 people. He had seen it in documentaries before, and now the most common thing Paris police do is extortion. From vendors to criminals to victims, arrest and knock on anyone. As for cracking down on crime, let's talk about it when we have time. After all, we have to earn back the money from buying a police position first, right? So maintaining public order largely relies on civilian patrol teams, but they are voluntary laborers without law enforcement powers, and their weapons are also very rudimentary. They can only scare and intimidate criminals, not even arrest them. So, the truly useful police force is probably the recruited over 60 people. The new book has set sail, kneeling down for collection, kneeling down for comments. Please support us a lot, Tianhaitian is extremely grateful. Also, if you have any plot that you would like to watch, please leave a message and let me know. I will definitely arrange it if possible. Nervous face, end of this chapter. Chapter 7. Reorganization of Police Force, Seeking Investment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Reorganization of Police Force, Seeking Investment. Joseph found out after flipping through the documents that these 180-plus police officers had not received enough salary for 4 months. Their salary is paid by the City Hall at 20% and the Chamber of Commerce at the remaining 80%. However, chambers of commerce often fail to raise enough money due to merchants not cooperating, resulting in lower salaries for police officers. Joseph frowned and shook his head. A region with around 60 people in charge of 80,000 people and unpaid. No wonder there were 28 murders in a month. No wonder at the beginning of the French Grand Order, when a large number of citizens went to the Rongjuan Academy to grab firearms, no one stopped them. Putting people first in everything, it seems that the top priority is to solve the problem of manpower. Joseph pondered for a long time, recalling various advanced policing concepts in later generations one by one, and wrote a full 4 or 5 pages to outline the framework for rectifying the police force, finally breathing a sigh of relief. He put down his pen and glanced at the first line he wrote, reorganize the civilian patrol team. He summoned Assistant Police Commissioner Bono and ordered, please gather all the police and civilian patrol teams in the San Antonio district here tomorrow morning. The latter was taken aback and said, Your Highness, are you saying, everyone? That's right, everyone. I will have Viscount Kizo transfer people from other districts to help patrol, you don't have to worry. Yes. Joseph turned to Edmond and said, please send someone to retrieve 20,000 livres from my private property. When the sun rose again, nearly 400 police officers and civilian patrol teams had gathered on the open field in front of the Paris police station, standing in 2 irregular squares. Although they were informed that they were going to see the Crown Prince today, who is their current boss, when they saw the handsome young man in a red double-breasted uniform and wearing a triangular hat on the wooden platform in front of them, their hearts were still filled with uncontrollable tension and shock. At exactly 9 o'clock, with a burst of military drums, Joseph raised his hand and loudly said, Good morning, gentlemen. I don't like to talk nonsense, there are only 3 in total. Please listen carefully. His voice may sound childish, but his aura is strong. Firstly, in the future, all the civilian patrol teams in the San Antonio district will be incorporated into the police force and become official police officers. Of course, those who do not want to come are not forced. The members of the civilian patrol team exploded directly. You know, buying a police position costs 500 livres. Prince Wang's light words make them all formal police officers. In Paris, although the reputation of the police is not very good, they are government positions with status and status. They spontaneously organize themselves to protect themselves. They used to dream of becoming police officers, and this is like taking a step to the sky. Joseph signaled for everyone to be quiet and continued, secondly, everyone will undergo an evaluation afterwards. The content includes moral character, physical strength, and professional ability. According to the score, you will be awarded a police rank, which is similar to a military rank, divided into police officer, sheriff, and sheriff, with each rank having 3 levels. In the future, when the police rank is promoted, the salary will also increase accordingly. Police officers receive a monthly salary of 18 livres starting from their apprenticeship. The salaries of first to third level police officers are 22, 25, and 30 livres respectively. The salary of a police officer starts from 40 livres. He pointed to several wooden crates next to him and said, "This is 20,000 livres. After the police rank is assessed, you will receive this month's salary. All future salaries will be paid in cash here and will not be delayed for a day. Let's fry again below." 30 livres is close to the income of city hall officials, and 22 livres is enough to make a living. It's still worth discovering money. The salary of the Paris police was only 16 livres before, and they often cheated, so they only received more than half of it. Everyone's eyes sparkled with the light reflected by silver coins. The evaluation must be fiercely contested. If you can be rated as a third-level police officer, at least 10 years less effort, no, 20 years less. As for those who have a big belly, looking at their own figure, their hearts have become anxious. Thirdly, Joseph's voice interrupted everyone's thoughts, a performance evaluation system will be implemented in the future. It is evaluated monthly based on indicators such as crime-solving rate, number of police officers, and number of complaints. If done well, bonuses will be given, and if not done well, salaries will be fined. The promotion of police ranks and positions will also be based on the evaluation results. He looked around at everyone present and said, "I'm done with what I said." I believe everyone agrees. Now, everyone is starting to reorganize and evaluate on site, and the reorganization work must be completed within 10 days. Yes. Immediately, a thunderous roar echoed from the audience. The members of the original civilian patrol team were so excited that their faces turned red and their hands trembled. The cries of "Long live the Crown Prince" echoed one after another. They never expected that today's unexpected gathering would bring about a huge change in fate. It can be foreseen that my future life will be full of hope. The Crown Prince has already become a savior in their hearts, emitting a divine radiance all over their bodies. Hundreds of people are secretly vowing to do their best and work hard to repay the Crown Prince's great kindness. Immediately, several Prince Wang's guards ran over, each calling on dozens of police officers and leading the entire team. Joseph's measures may seem commonplace to future generations, but in the 18th century, they were definitely the most advanced concepts. Unified staffing, job segmentation, performance evaluation, and more capable individuals. All of which were disruptive improvements. According to the original historical trajectory, it was not until decades later that the brilliant and strategic Napoleon began police reform, and what he did without even half of Joseph became a role model for the whole of Europe. 2 days later, the residents of San Antonio noticed many new things. A wooden box with a slit at the top is hung at the intersection of each street, with the words, "Police Complaint Box," painted on it. There are also small letters next to it indicating that all dissatisfaction with the police can be directly written down and submitted here, and the police commissioner will personally inspect and handle it. The processing result will be immediately made public. In many densely populated areas, there are a large number of wooden frames under construction. According to the carpenters, these are the security booths required by the police station, and in the future, there will be police on standby inside to support patrolling police at any time. The novel, Madam, Please Stop, has been completed, with a fantasy version and an audio version available. Welcome to read. Introduction to Madam, Please Stop. The surgeon traveled through time and unexpectedly came to a foreign world where there were many strong women and weak men, and many women and few men, becoming the young master of the Su family, Su Yang. Women with strong spiritual power can move mountains and fill the sea, pick stars to block the sun, and conquer this world with their strength. I rely on soft rice. Conquer the world with soft power. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Difficulties. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Difficulties 3 days later. Municipal Commissioner's Office. Sir, Do you know about the situation where the Crown Prince reorganized the police force? Frova stared at the city commissioner with concern. The Duke of Orleans meant to embarrass the Crown Prince, but now he's making a name for himself. The morale of those police officers is high, and I'm worried. L.A. Vebel carefully selected a bottle of wine in the wine cabinet and said, "Relax, Gale, someone will come and solve this." Someone solved it. Who is it? L.A. Vebel looked at the light and admired the purple liquid in the bottle, saying calmly, "I just scattered the news from the Crown Prince's side yesterday. I guess some people may have been unable to sit still." As he was speaking, the chief police officer, Guizot, knocked on the door and hastily saluted him, saying urgently, "Your Excellency, you must go and advise His Royal Highness the Crown Prince." "Oh." The chubby mayor took out the bottle opener and deliberately asked, "What do you advise him of?" Guizot impatiently ran his leather boots over the floor and said, "Didn't you hear that Your Highness has changed the police force beyond recognition, which will seriously affect the security of the San Antonio district?" He described Joseph's reorganization of the police force and said with a bitter face, "To be honest, if someone else dared to make such a big mess, I would have fired him long ago, but this is His Highness the Crown Prince. Look." Levable forcefully pulled out the cork, sniffed the aroma of wine emanating from the bottle, shook his head, and said, "Viscount Guizot, it's difficult for me to have a say in what the Crown Prince is doing within the police department. And I have to be busy with funding lately. You know, the Chamber of Commerce only provides a small amount of funding, while the Crown Prince has added a large number of police officers, and nearly half of the police department's funds have to be allocated to the San Antonio district. How can this work?" Guizot exclaimed in surprise, "He can't take up so much of the budget. You must help me think of a way." L.A. Vebert pondered for a while as a difficult situation, poured a glass of wine and stuffed it for Guizot. A faint smile flashed around his eyes and he said, "It's not without room for maneuver. For example, if you can make the Crown Prince understand the difficulty and retreat, I will try my best to cooperate with you." Guizot gave him a deep glance, took a sip of his wine, nodded vigorously, and bid farewell with a dark face. The office door closed, and Frova looked at the chubby mayor in surprise. "Sir, how did you know Viscount Guizot would come?" Levable handed him another glass of wine and said with a smile, "Although the Crown Prince has some abilities, he is still a child. He only sees things in front of him, but ignores the impact it brings." Impact. L.A. Vebert took a sip of his wine and said, "Besides the funding from the Chamber of Commerce, the biggest source of income for the police force is the profit from selling police positions. I have spread the news that the Crown Prince has promoted commoners to police positions. Those who originally planned to buy police positions would surely guess that in the future, there will be no need to buy police positions in Paris. Who is willing to pay at this time? This is the biggest trouble for the police force." The chubby mayor proudly shook his glass. "If I deduct some of the funding from the city hall for Guizot, they will definitely go crazy." "What do you think they will do?" Flova's eyes lit up and he said, "I will do my best to stop the Crown Prince." "That's right. The sunset sets in the west." Police Commissioner Guizot's carriage finally arrived at the San Antonio District Police Station. In Joseph's office, Guizot respectfully bowed and forced a smile to compliment, "Your Highness, you are really amazing. With such a reorganization, the police force has been completely revitalized." After blowing his rainbow fart for a while, he put on a worried expression and said, "However, the people from the civilian patrol team you joined the police force are not even skilled in using swords, nor have they touched crossbows or firearms. They need to train for at least 3 or 4 months, otherwise they won't even be able to deal with the hooligans on the street. During the months of their training, no one else has been responsible for the patrol work. You previously asked me to transfer more than 120 police officers from other districts, but the security pressure on their side is also very high, and they will have to go back soon." Joseph asked him to sit down and smiled, "It shouldn't take that long. I have a simple training method that can complete combat training in about 10 days. It shouldn't be a problem to borrow police officers from other districts for more than 10 days, right? Of course, that's possible. Kizo changed his serious expression, but training is extremely important and we can't handle it hastily. Thank you for your reminder, Joseph said. Don't worry, I have a sense of propriety. Okay. Kizo nodded awkwardly, still unwilling to give up. Your Highness, there's one more thing. You can summon over 200 police officers at once, and the police station won't be able to provide them with so much equipment. You don't have to worry about the equipment, I will solve it myself. Kizo didn't expect the difficult problem he had carefully prepared, and the Crown Prince didn't take it seriously. He raised several tough questions about police reform, but still had little effect. In the end, he had to bid farewell and leave, feeling restless all the way. It seemed that the Crown Prince insisted on disrupting the police station. I'm afraid there won't be much funding left for myself by the City Hall in the future. In fact, he was overthinking it. Joseph didn't even care about the funding from the police department, and the fact that police funds were raised by private chambers of commerce was not normal in itself. He has various technologies and advanced concepts from later generations, and he has a lot of ways to make money. He has to plug the whole of France's 2 billion foreign debt, and supporting a police system is just a small matter. On the carriage, Kizo's gaze gradually became cold, and he must kick the Crown Prince out of the police system as soon as possible to restore everything to its original state. Shortly after Kizo's departure, 2 exquisite carriages arrived at the San Antonio District Police Station. Louis XVI's attendant got out of the car, put on gold-rimmed glasses, frowned, and looked at the dilapidated police station, confirming that it was right here. Then he quickly walked in with the servant. After seeing Joseph, he first followed the court etiquette to complete the entire procedure, and then respectfully handed over a letter. Your Highness, this is a letter from His Majesty the King to you. Then he gestured to the servant behind him to open the exquisite wooden box and said, Your Majesty the Queen learned that you didn't even bring the imperial chef with you, and she was afraid that you wouldn't eat well, so she had someone make these. Joseph looked into the box and saw carefully crafted cakes, strawberry pies, puffs, and various candies. He supported his forehead with a bitter smile, feeling overwhelmed at a glance, but he knew that it was all genuine love from Queen Mary. He opened the lacquer on the envelope again, unfolded the letter, and saw the beautiful and smooth Italian script of 16. Dear Joseph, I hope this letter can bring you my full thoughts and warmth. Here, as a father, I express my deep concern to you. Do you know, I finally completed Salamander Spray. I dare to swear to the Lord that it is definitely the best artwork. Let's introduce his lock. After the production was completed, the first thing I wanted to share with you was that I found out you were working at the City Hall. I'm sorry, I really stayed in the workshop for too long, I don't even know. How are you living in Paris? Your mother is really, you are only 13 years old, how can you let yourself suffer this burden? This is what Brian and his team should do. Oh, by the way, I heard you have finished your college courses. How did you do it? It's unbelievable, I'm proud of you. Son, you are the pride of the entire royal family. I am certain that in the future, you will be able to bring France back to the glory of the Sun King era. Praising my son for a whole page, Joseph, I heard that you are currently reforming the police department and doing a good job. What a great job. Just let go and do what you want to do. If anything goes wrong, I'll hold on to it for you. I'll always support you. If you feel tired, go back to the Palace of Versailles as soon as possible. Your mother always worries about you not eating well. Finally, I want to tell you that no matter where you are, you will always be my dearest son. Kiss you 1,000 times. Although the letter was filled with French meat and hemp, Joseph still felt the strong fatherly love in it. He took a deep breath, realizing that his parents in his previous life were not in good health and had passed away during his college years. He has long lost the warmth of family affection, and now he feels full of warmth in his heart, hoping that this life can live safely and long with his family. New book set sale, kneeling for collection, kneeling for recommendation, kneeling for comments. Please support us a lot. The author is very grateful. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Effectiveness, Seeking Monthly Tickets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Effectiveness, Seeking Monthly Tickets. In the blink of an eye, it was the 10th day since Joseph took over the police force. Dust was flying on the open space in front of the San Antonio District Police Station, with over 200 cute new police officers dressed in straight blue military uniforms, wearing blue and white wide-brimmed hats, and practicing with their uniquely shaped weapons, sweating profusely. These military uniforms were purchased by Joseph from the army stationed in the suburbs of Paris for thousands of livres. At present, police officers in France and even Europe are dressed casually, without any uniform at all. The police in San Antonio district have been ahead of them for decades in terms of clothing alone. In terms of the weapons and equipment of the police officers, Joseph did not choose a musket. This thing did not require half a year of hard training, and holding it was not much different from holding a fire stick. He didn't even equip the police force with a large number of swords, but instead had the carpenter create over 200 Y-shaped wooden forks that were about 2 meters long. Another thing is to have a shield for every 2 people. Although these things may look simple, they are extremely practical. The security guards at airports and stations in later generations used this set, which, when combined with specific formations, had excellent riot prevention effects. These police officers from the bottom of Paris cherish their police identity extremely, training for 10 hours every day, and not a single one cries out. Joseph looked at the training ground with satisfaction, and according to the plan, starting from noon today, this brand new police force will be responsible for the security of the San Antonio district. Of course, criminal cases also rely on the original 60 veteran police officers of the police force. As for those who spend money to become police officers, Joseph basically categorizes them as logistics teams, responsible for cleaning, moving, and other miscellaneous tasks, and their salaries are naturally the lowest. Nowadays, there are a total of 50 criminal police officers, 236 patrol officers, and 125 miscellaneous officers in the St. Anthony District Police Station, which can be considered as elite soldiers and strong horses throughout Paris. You should know that these more than 280 main police officers are all full of energy and high morale, completely different from the thugs and rascals of other district police officers. And these people can truly maintain public order, completely different from the old police officers who mainly focus on extortion. Especially in terms of sense of responsibility, they can withstand the previous 8 police officers. It can be said that this is the true modern police force. Under the scorching sun, after lunch, with Joseph's command, nearly 300 police officers, shouting loud slogans, lined up to leave the police station and officially took over the security of the San Antonio district. In fact, they have been patrolling in this area before and have a clear understanding of where accidents are likely to occur. It can be said that they have rich experience. Now that they have a formal identity and advanced management models, their ability to control crime has doubled. The citizens had already received the news, but apart from glancing at the imposing uniforms of the police, they didn't pay much attention. What else can they expect from French police? On the east side of the San Antonio district, Old Street, there were vulgar insults and roars coming from a back alley. 4 or 5 strong men in black vests and felt hats forced a middle-aged man to a corner of the wall, swaying his wooden sticks and iron axes back and forth. How dare you owe the money from the Viper gang? Have you lived enough? The middle-aged man shrank into a ball of fear and said, "A few masters, I'll hand it over next week. For God's sake. You have already owed protection fees 3 times this year." A red-haired man gestured to his subordinates with a smile on his face. "According to the rules, I need to teach you a lesson." No. Before the middle-aged man could finish speaking, a strong man wearing a felt hat swung a stick and slammed it fiercely on his arm. Suddenly, there was a sound of bones shattering, accompanied by screams that were not like those emitted by humans. The red-haired man ran his foot over the twisted middle-aged man on the ground and said, "Remember, next week. If you dare to default again, it's the other hand." As he was speaking, 4 people dressed in blue military uniforms and wearing wide-brimmed hats suddenly flashed out of the alley, looking at the wounded who were constantly groaning on the ground. The red-haired man recognized 2 of them and casually said, "Baptiste and Quillian. I heard you became a police officer." These clothes fit quite well. These 2 people are the original members of the civilian patrol team, and they are also familiar with the Viper gang. The red-haired man shook the knife in his hand and said, "I'm here to collect the money. Get out of my way." The police officer named Quillian suddenly took out a whistle and blew it hard, then pointed to a few people and drank, "Assault on the street, I want to arrest you." He used to be a tanner. In order to take care of his family's safety, he voluntarily joined the patrol team and patrolled nearby from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. every day. When encountering villains like the Viper gang, they usually avoid as much as they can. And now he is a genuine police officer, earning a high salary of 35 livres per month. His wife and 2 children have white bread to eat every day, and they can also eat some meat every few days. This is a situation that he has only experienced in his dreams before. Now he only wants to do one thing, which is to do his best to maintain the security of this area, maintain the happy life of his family, and also repay the crown prince. Besides, catching more criminals can increase performance, and the higher the performance score, the higher the bonus. He and 3 other police officers shouted at the same time, in the name of the crown prince. Up. The red-haired man disdainfully snorted and waved to his younger brothers, "Teach these fools a lesson." He is very confident, not to mention the patrol team. Even the police are fierce and cowardly, and even if they see a little blood, they will cry and run away like women. However, this time he was wrong. 3 police officers took off the 2-meter-long Y-shaped wooden forks behind them, stepped forward neatly, and used the wooden forks to block the waist of the 2 young Viper helpers who were rushing forward. This wooden fork has a head as wide as an arm, and can be pierced even with eyes closed. It is the security artifact of later generations. The anti-riot waist fork. Another police officer with a spear seized the opportunity and stabbed the left gang member's foot with a spear. With a mournful cry, the person covered their feet and rolled to the ground. The little brother of the Viper gang next to him bared his teeth and glared, swung his short sword fiercely, but was blocked by a wooden fork and couldn't reach the police. The red-haired man was furious and led the charge. Although there were also 4 people on his side, they were blocked by riot prevention waist forks and could not approach the police for a long time. On the contrary, 2 of his subordinates were ambushed with spears and stabbed in the calf. The red-haired man felt extremely frustrated, and the combat skills he had developed over a decade of licking blood with his blade could not be used in front of the eerie formation of the police. This is exactly the security fighting method taught by Joseph to the police force, which is commonly used in later stations and airports. Its characteristic is that it does not seek to kill the enemy, only seeks to hold back, and is also conducive to self-protection. More importantly, this gameplay is simple and easy to learn, and anyone who practices it for a week can master it. The red-haired man's teeth have all been bitten apart. I can't figure out why these police officers are so difficult to deal with today. Quickly, he decided to give up. He almost got stabbed himself. And waved his hand decisively, shouting, "Withdraw." However, at a security pavilion half a street away, a police officer on duty had already heard the whistle and immediately dispatched 4 people to provide support. When they arrived at the narrow alley, they were colliding head-on with the Viper gang who were planning to escape. The leading police shouted, "In the name of the Crown Prince," and 3 riot prevention waist forks instantly crossed in front of them. New book set sail, kneeling for collection, kneeling for recommendation, kneeling for comments. Please support us a lot. The author is very grateful. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Great Chaos. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Great chaos. The members of the Viper gang only resisted a little before being pinned to the ground by wooden forks that were sandwiched back and forth, snorting in fear. Quillian thanked his colleagues who came to support him while tying the criminals one by one with ropes. On this day, the same scene appeared throughout the Saint Anton district. The police were as if they had been beaten with chicken blood. When they saw someone committing a crime, they immediately shouted, "In the name of the Crown Prince," and rushed forward, using riot prevention waste forks and spears to teach Xiao Xiao a harsh lesson. For a moment, the thieves, robbers, and gang members in the San Antonio district were in a state of embarrassment and anxiety, and no longer had the arrogant aura they used to have. The residents of San Antonio witnessed the police cracking down on crime everywhere, both shocked and delighted. Many notorious gang members and criminals were arrested one after another, and they had never seen such a serious police officer maintaining order. In this era, the people have extremely low requirements for public security. If they are stolen or robbed, they will consider themselves unlucky. As long as their lives are safe, they are already very satisfied. At this point, the actions of the new police force had already greatly exceeded their expectations. Soon, someone spontaneously delivered water and food to the police, cheering along the street for the police who caught the criminal, while the encouraged police worked even harder. Not long after, the citizens learned a new trick. When encountering a crime, shouting, "In the name of the prince," has a good chance of scaring away the criminals. Royal Palace. The Duke of Orleans looked at the Paris news on the table, his face not looking very good. The front page title of the newspaper was, "Chaos in the Antony District, Prince Presiding Over Police Reform." Compared to the vague rhetoric of the Paris news newspaper under his control, the nearby tabloids were quite straightforward. The prince rectifies police, security in the St. Anthony district improves, the citizens of the St. Anthony district praise the new police force, the prince's clever strategy, 3 minutes to solve the dental murder case. The Duke of Orleans felt restless in his heart. He originally wanted to take advantage of the chaotic security in the San Antonio district to make the newspaper humiliate the Crown Prince, but he didn't expect it to actually help him increase his reputation. This Joseph can transform the police force in just over 10 days, and this method doesn't seem like a 13-year-old boy. At this thought, he frowned abruptly. Could it be that the Austrian cousin borrowed her son's hand to clean up the Parisian officialdom from the police station? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was the only possibility. After all, it was impossible for the young Crown Prince alone to achieve all of this. That will further disrupt the Queen's plan, and we must not let the royal family stir up any waves. The Duke of Orleans pondered for a moment and quickly wrote a letter, summoning the butler to command, "Give this letter to L.A. Vebert, tell him to do this at all costs, and I can consider helping him become the governor of Normandy." "Yes, sir." In a small villa on the east bank of the Seine River, Paris Police Commissioner Guizot glanced at the open door and shouted to the mistress eavesdropping outside, "Anna, close the door and keep an eye on the servants." "Oh," the woman reluctantly closed the door and walked away, muttering softly, "Humph, you treat me like a maid. This is my home." Guizot then looked back at the short curly-haired man in front of him, took a strong puff on his pipe, and said, "Cimarron, this time the Crown Prince is not going back to the Palace of Versailles after playing for a few days, but will be staying at the police station all the time." The short man was the former San Antonio District Police Commissioner who had been taken sick leave. He immediately exclaimed, "But the city commissioner said that I can be reinstated to my original position in at most 2 months. Who knew it would turn out like this?" Guizot took a puff of smoke. "It's not just you right now, the Crown Prince is a big trouble for the entire police station." He stared at Cimarron and said, "There's one thing now, if you can do well, not only can you reinstate your original position, but you can even get promoted." The short man's eyes flashed with joy. "Sir, just give orders. You are most familiar with the San Antonio district. Who is the most powerful gang there?" "The Hose Gang and the Black Sheep Gang," said Cimarron. "They control more than 80% of the territory in this district, each with hundreds of subordinates." Guizot nodded, took out a piece of paper and handed it to him, his eyes flashing with madness. You go find them, whether it's dismemberment or rape, or kidnapping or arson. Anyway, let them disrupt the San Antonio area. If the situation gets out of control, it will be completely chaotic. Semilion was so surprised by those words that his pupils shrank. After a while, he nodded and said, okay, it's completely chaotic. He glanced at the paper in his hand again and immediately bounced up from the chair, saying in a lost voice, 30 to 30,000 livres. That piece of paper is exactly a bill of exchange for 30,000 livres. At present, 20,000 livres can buy a villa in Paris, and 30,000 livres is definitely a huge sum that can drive any gang crazy. This little money is nothing. Kizo gestured for him to sit down. You tell those gang members that as long as they do something that can cause panic, they can give 1,000 livres at a time. In a month, whoever does better can get another 20,000 livres. Yes, sir. Semilion's hands trembled slightly with nervousness. All right, you go ahead and take care of it. Kizo gave him a deep look again. Also, if there's any accident, the big shot behind me will help you clean it up, but it's all your own idea and has nothing to do with me, remember? Yes. Remember, rest assured. Kizo stood at the window, watching the hurried departure of Semilion, with a sneer on his lips. He didn't originally plan to play so much, but yesterday Loebel told him to just let go and do it. If something happens, he will take it easy, so he has no worries anymore. Your Highness, it's great for you to enjoy your fortune in the palace of Versailles. You must come wading in this muddy water, he gritted his teeth and muttered to himself. 3 days later. San Antonio District Police Department. Joseph was flipping through citizen complaint letters under the shade of a tree. Mostly praising the police. And the security inspector, Magnay, suddenly rushed over and saluted, panting and saying, Your Highness, there's an accident again. 2 people were killed in a shoe store on Bayouenway Street, and the store was also burned down. Joseph frowned immediately. Since the afternoon before yesterday, there have been multiple malignant cases in the San Antonio district. 2 people died the day before yesterday, 3 died yesterday, and 2 were seriously injured. He thought it was an accidental event, but he didn't expect it to come again today. How is the situation? Alden has taken people, said Magoni. The fire has been extinguished and the culprit has not been caught yet. Joseph immediately returned to the office and began mobilizing manpower to carry out case response work. As dusk approached, Alden brought back the progress of the White Lantern Street case and was reporting it to Joseph. Unexpectedly, another police officer brought bad news. The Black Sheep gang had gone crazy and had been chopping people everywhere on Miss Sandra Street, with 7 or 8 passers-by injured and in urgent need of police support. New book set sale, kneeling for collection, kneeling for recommendation, kneeling for comments. Please support us a lot. The author is very grateful. End of this chapter.